satellites?
A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.
Yeah, satellite haiku. How's it going?
Welcome to Satellite Haiku.
35 years we've said we've been having this conversation?
Yeah.
35
Yeah,
years.
official now, officially podcasted now, but yeah, 35 years of, I think, does that sound right? 35 years? How old were we 35 years ago? 20? No, it's more than 35 years then.
We'll start with 20 and I'm 56 and you're 56. So then that's 36 plus, let's say 2 or 3, maybe 3. So 36. Yeah. So wow, did I say 39 years?
You said 35, so it's more like 39.
Yeah.
40.
Wow.
Yeah, 40 years.
40 years, we're heading on to 40 years. That's great. Well, it's been a joy to be, in community with you. So.
Yeah, I love that we do this every week. What are we talking about this time?
Wow. A lot has happened. A lot has happened.
There's a lot of shit in the news, and it's just like, I'm finding it hard not to be furious at people I know, particularly people I know, but just like, it feels so stupid. Like, I feel like we've been subjected to this because of stupidity, because of ignorance, or, like, I told you last week that I had a little bit of a knockdown drag out with my mom about it. Like, I actually kind of let loose a little bit about how I feel about what's going on. Oh my God. But it's just so unsatisfying because I want to try to figure it out, but every time anyone who voted that way tries to explain themselves, it just sounds more stupid than anything. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's either stupid, like the most charitable interpretation is that it sounds stupid. I mean, there's racism and all those other ways that you hear racist kind of stuff, but like the most generous is just, it's stupid.
The most generous is stupid. That's an interesting
because like they'll say like, well, I care about the deficit. Well, then you voted for huge tax cuts, so obviously you don't care about the deficit, and then they pivot to something else. Well, what about the open borders? Well, there's no open border, like, and then you dig into that a little bit, and they don't know anything about the border. They're like, well, I watched a video. Well, like, fuck you, like. You don't know anything about the border, so you obviously don't really care about that issue either. So the price of eggs. Well, you voted for tariffs. Okay, so you don't care about prices either. So unions, right? Like you had that frustration with unions. So every time you try to talk about it, like the stuff people, my mom will say, well, I didn't like how Joe Biden was sometimes creepy with women or kids. I'm like, you voted for a rapist.
Yeah, I do that.
I mean, like every explanation sounds more stupid than the last one.
His teen beauty contest, he liked to go into the dressing room and see, like how could, it's so interesting. Yeah, like,
so I just get more angry when I talk about it with these people because each thing they say makes less sense than the last thing they said. They're just flailing for because it has nothing to do with reason. There's no reasons for it. They just felt something, whatever. They just felt some pull, and they're trying to explain it to themselves after the fact. And so I don't want to talk about this forever, but like it just makes me so mad when I try to, like, I open my ears to their reasoning, and then their reasoning just is so stupid and nonsensical that I get more angry when I try to listen.
Yeah, it is an interesting question. Because I get really frustrated at times, and then at other times I think, well, that's not doing any good. So what if I tried to pull back and see the big picture and think like, how fascinating that this guy has such a sort of library of failures, but has somehow been able to flip the perception of everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
literally everything feels upside down.
Yeah, like he's fat and out of shape, and then they post pictures of him like ripped, like with Rocky's body and stuff. And like I think in their mind they look at him and they're like, I think he has Rocky's body under that shirt. Like I just don't. Yeah. It's so it's kind of fascinating actually. In the same way that it's fascinating that the dinosaurs had zero culpability for their demise, but we had have or will have 100%. And in some ways,
it's because people are stupid. That's the thing. Like there's truly bad actors out there, but then there's just a bunch of people that just seem it's just like a lot of people are dumb. Like that, I wish there was something more, that I could latch onto other than like a lot of people are dumb. Like there was a guy, I'm way too online, obviously, because I'm mad about this stuff and I shouldn't be online as much. But I saw an exchange, Andrew Sullivan, the writer, commentator, pundit, who I don't even agree with a lot of the time. He's been writing about these latest kind of free speech, like people being scooped up on campuses, like that Mahmoud Khalil guy, and now there's like a Korean young woman who participated in a protest. That was all she did. She's been in the country since she was 7.
Was she the one that they grabbed her off the sidewalk like yesterday?
No, that was another one. So that was that was another one who wrote an op-ed in her Tufts. At Tufts University. She wrote an op-ed, and apparently that's the reason why they've just kidnapped her and sent her into a prison now in a detention center in Louisiana, right? So these things are insane. And so I saw Andrew Sullivan's been posting about these and just saying like the people who are defending, the detention of Mahmoud Khalil, they can't defend these one. Like he's saying, because he's arguing with people online, and I'm reading these exchanges a little bit. And so like each one of these people gets scooped up and in his comments, of course, are all the people who are like, yeah, well, they're, get them out. If they're with the terrorists, get them out. And it's like, well, but there's no due process. So how do they prove, who's proving that they're with terrorists? Like what's they're just, well, they don't deserve due process if they're with the terrorists, they don't even deserve due process. And we're like, and then the exchange goes back and forth, and it's like, well, how do you prove, like, let's say they come at you and they tell you you're a terrorist, you're with the terrorists, and they arrest you. How do you prove that you're not, that you're innocent? And, they're like, well, I show them my ID when they try to arrest me. And like, dude, that's due process, you pine cone. Like,
right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's true. And I mean, my wife texted me yesterday, like, I don't want to travel outside the country. Like, I'm scared of like, and actually, to be perfectly honest,
I wouldn't if I were her.
I think that so here's a question. Do you think that, do you remember when I think it was in Apocalypse Now, when the Colonel Kurtz character asks the Marlowe character, do you find my methods unsound? And he responds, sir, I see no method at all.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're kind of there. Like, I feel like you could say they're randomly picking people and just trying to scare everyone. Like, pick one law firm, 2 law firms threaten to like lose $1 billion of clients. They actually were going after the law firm Weiss's clients. Like, they were going to say, if you work with this firm, like you can't have a contract with the federal government. So if you can scare people by doing like 2 performative things that are totally illegal without due process, and there's no repercussions, then everyone else is chilled and frozen because they, like we're saying, like Julio doesn't want to travel outside the country. I'm thinking about all the things I would need to delete, all the, think about.
Yeah, I think about that too. And then I think like, well, deleting your shit is kind of like obeying in advance in a way. Yeah. It's cowering in a way. And I don't really want to be that. I don't want to cower in the face of this. But I hear all kinds of stories of people arriving in airports, all different citizenship statuses or tourists, coming to visit and things like that, and having their phones searched and all this stuff. Like, it's crazy.
Well, what's fascinating too is that again, like, it's fairly obvious that Trump wants to sidle up next to Putin and reopen relations and trade with Russia. Like, he just would like to invite them back to the G7, make it. And I feel like weirdly he's attacking like his closest friends, like Canada. Yeah. And now he just put 25%
and
tariff.
All of
Europe and Japan and Korea, because they have cars, they make cars. And what's strange to me is like to rendition or to sort of capture like German tourists and a French scientist and a Lebanese doctor.
Well, it just seems like the ICE agents and the Border Patrol are just, I doubt that they're getting really specific orders. Kind of to your point, like I don't see a plan. Sir, I don't see. What did you say? I don't see methods.
He said.
Whatever.
He said, "Do you find my methods unsound?" And he goes, "Sir, I see no method at all.
I see no method." Right? Yeah.
I don't
So,
see a method.
like, I tend to doubt that these, the agents at the borders have very clear directives. That they've just have this sort of vague directive to be more sort of stringent about entry into the U.S. And so they're just interpreting that however they decide to on the ground, agent by agent, or border by border crossing, port by port, I guess. It seems like there hasn't been enough time for all those people to get very clear, very specific directives about how to treat people from which country and which kinds of papers to scrutinize more closely than others and all that stuff. It seems to me that there's a lot of improv probably going on based on general guidance to be strict. But I also think like detention is probably, I've heard some people say, and this makes sense to me, that detention is being used as a method in itself. Like they're scooping up people, they're putting them in detention, and the conditions of detention are such that people are willing to sign papers to get out of detention, even if the papers are deportation orders. Right?
Interesting. Yeah, like I'm willing.
So, like people who have a right to be here are faced with like, well, you might be in this facility for 10 months or a year before you get a trial. Like, they're not letting people talk to their lawyers and whatnot. So if you're faced with this sort of open-ended detention and you don't know how or when it might end, yeah, I could see it would be kind of tempting just to sign some, like, fine, I'll go back to Lebanon or whatever just to get out of this building.
Right. No, it's true. And Robert Reich posted yesterday, like, about the idea that, hey, don't kid yourself that you say, well, I'm an American citizen. If you were flying back from Europe and the Border Patrol guys just flagged you, as you said, you might be like, I'm an American citizen. And then they'd be like, off to El Salvador. And you would never have any way to request or demand due process or to prove that you're a citizen. They take away your passport.
Or they would, they would sort of have this sort of, you'll have a trial at some point.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, here, you go into this facility in Louisiana or El Salvador or wherever, like, okay, you're claiming that you have legal status. Well, we'll find out. But in the meantime, we'll get to it when we can. And in the meantime, here you go. You're stuck in this place. Yeah.
And the truth is, like, I mean, there's this whole idea about like the union's unity, like, that fist. And if you all go on strike, then the oligarchs have to listen because there's no one to do the work. So if you can pull together, and the truth is this sort of divide and conquer, and also just sort of these tiny little cuts, like this idea of like one person who's German, two people who are German, a French person, like you're trying to sort of make this random scary scenario that so everyone else will just obey, as you said, like preemptively.
Yeah.
I wonder, like, for instance, wouldn't scaring European tourists or Asian tourists from coming to the U.S., wouldn't that destroy our tourist economy?
Yeah. Absolutely. All these things are really, I mean, this is why autocracies are shitty shitty economic prospects for everybody because of all those things, right? Yeah. Like anyway, so, but it's so infuriating to talk to anybody about this who isn't already in agreement, who's sort of like voted for the other side or whatever, because God, it's like another thing, my mom, another thing she said, well, she's raised she raised the issue of people smashing windows at Tesla dealerships or something, or burning Tesla. I was like, are you fucking serious right now? Like and it just reveals what news she's listening to, right? Mm-hmm. Like really, that's the thing you're gonna, or death threats to Elon Musk. Like, are you fucking serious? Like, there's so many people who get death threats. Elon Musk is the last person on Earth, literally probably the last person on Earth I'd be worried about receiving. Like, he's the richest man. He can purchase whatever security, protection, whatever he needs. And so, like,
and the Cybertruck is
it just makes me mad when I try to talk to anybody, because that's the shit that they end up saying, and then I want to lose my fucking mind.
So related, but also just kind of Schadenfreude explosion. I read like 2 days ago that every single Cybertruck has been recalled for the panels.
Oh, really?
Because the panels were glued on and they're starting to pop off.
You know, I was thinking, like, let's pivot away from this a little bit.
Yeah,
I was thinking that this is a weird metaphor, a weird segue, but, you know, I was thinking, like, when you're a billionaire, like, why are so many billionaires kind of like just bad people, seemingly? I don't know. And I was just thinking, like, there's so many times as a billionaire, like at some point during your wealth accumulation, you start to have to tell the story about why you deserve this wealth. You know, because like you start to maybe feel guilty, like I should be doing something good with my money, right? I should be sharing my wealth or, you know, right? But then you don't want to. And so you make up reasons why you shouldn't, you know, like, well, money wouldn't help any of these problems anyway. And you start telling stories to yourself about like why it doesn't make sense to share your wealth, right? And why I'm not a bad person. Nobody wants to be the bad guy, right? So you probably start telling stories to yourself about, you know, well, I'm not being a billionaire doesn't make me a bad person, right? And you kind of have to fill that in with all kinds of rationalizations, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense to share my wealth. People don't deserve it. I worked for this, whatever the reasons are. And then, you know, after telling yourself all those stories for so long and defending yourself against the counter to those arguments, you know, you start to believe it, right? Like, at some point. I was just thinking that as I see Teslas driving around, I know a few people who got rid of their Teslas, right?
Yeah.
And then there's other people who, you know, probably can't get rid of their Teslas because they're locked into a lease. And there's probably other people who don't really want to. They just like their Tesla. And they're like, I really like this car. I hate Elon Musk. But like, at some point, then you start to go, well, you feel like a little bad driving your Tesla around, maybe. And then you start to defend it to yourself a little bit. Like, well, I mean, it is a nice car. And then you start saying, well, I mean, Elon, he made this company, so like he can't be that bad, you know. And then eventually, you know, the more you tell yourself that little story, the more you start to believe it. And so I was thinking that, like, what does it feel like right now to be driving a Tesla? You either you're in a position where you sort of have to double down on it, kind of like doubling down on being a billionaire. You kind of have to double down on rationalizing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, totally. I'm thinking like I've seen a couple of funny memes where people put like a big, huge Toyota sticker across the back of their Cybertruck.
Yeah, of the Cybertruck, yeah.
And then a friend of mine has that. There's a common bumper sticker you can get that says, I bought this before Elon went insane. Things like that.
There's a neighbor up the block that has that on his they have two Teslas, and they have a sticker that says, yeah, we bought this before we knew he was a jerk or whatever. I think that's the language that one theirs uses. But I don't know. Like, I see so many Teslas in this city. It's an absurd number of Teslas. I'll be driving on a block, you know, a given block, and there will be 4 Teslas on, you know, driving on that same block with me at the same time. So there's so many here. It's insane how many there are. But I do know I am seeing a lot more Hyundais and this new Honda Prologue. I've seen that proliferating. And the Rivian trucks are all over the place all of a sudden. So I think people are, you know, starting to get other ones.
That's true. I wanted to pivot to a question about like, so very far left and very far right and populism. So like Denver, Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had 34,000 people show up. And then in Tucson.
Didn't they go to Tucson? Yeah.
Tucson, 24,000 people at Catalina High School football field, like with the stadium.
Wow.
The stadium.
Yeah.
And so they had overflow and people sitting on the grass, and like you couldn't even get anywhere near there in a car. Like it was just, and so, I forget who it was, but they were talking about how the fact that Steve Bannon is a populist and so far to the right, he hates the tax cuts, he hates Elon Musk, and he's talked very, like he said that AOC is one of the most talented politicians of our era. And my question, sort of my the discussion point is really just like when you move so far to the left or so far to the right that you're a populist and you're just speaking to the people. Could we come together? Like, could we come around and make a coalition where like we both believe we're anti-oligarch, anti-Elon Musk, anti-tax cuts. And
absolutely. I mean, I think that's where this sentiment comes from, that like they are trying to divide us, right? Like there is this recognition I see on both sides that like that we aren't as divided as we seem, that some of these issues around culture war things are distractions, almost like intentional distractions. So I think there's some truth in that for sure. I mean, I think I see the sentiment on the right that I don't think anybody wants to be this divided.
Right. Like,
and I see the sentiment like, why can't we be more unified and united? And it does seem like there are those big areas, those populist kind of issues where people are really. That's why that A More Perfect Union, that group, like there's a guy from that organization that goes around, does like man on the street interviews, mostly in the South, Bible Belt kind of, but he's very progressive. But A More Perfect Union, the whole thing is sort of union focused and worker focused. And so he goes around and finds people who are pretty far right, Trump voters mostly, and gets them really talking about like worker stuff, workers' rights and unions, and And so I think there is for sure a big, strong current there, and it does seem like we could come together.
So there's a couple of those type of topics. So one would be gun control. So pivoting to that and saying, remember during the Uvalde massacre, the 400 operatives were there, and they wouldn't approach the room because they knew that the gun that he had and the high velocity bullet of his AR-15 could pierce their body armor. So I sat there sort of baffled that like, wouldn't the first go-to group to stand up and say, ban the AR-15, it's a battlefield weapon, let's get it off the streets? Wouldn't it be the cops?
Well, the police are for gun control for the most part, until really recently, when so many individual officers are really strong right-wing guys and strong Second Amendment guys. But like, that's a pretty recent phenomenon. Like the police unions and all of those, like the larger police kind of organizations, fraternal order police, they were all pretty pro-gun control, I was going to say. And I would say only in the last 10 years has that become a more divisive issue among police.
Interesting. So I was talking to...
Really recently.
This was like before the election, and we were down in Green Valley, like half an hour south of here, at like an old people's golf course / clubhouse where there were maybe 400 people listening to the candidates. The Democrats were all showing up for the region, like local Democrats. There's a guy there that I've known before. He's a filmmaker. He does... And we were talking about this issue of the AR-15, and he said, well, you're talking to the wrong guy. I'm a Democrat, and I've always been, but I live out in the country, and I have a bunch of AR-15s, and I've even modified them so they're like fully automatic. And I said, okay, let me back away from just the type of gun. What about, could you get behind, as someone who filed down your AR-15 so it's automatic, could you get behind just making it so you have to be 21? Because so many of the school shootings where some 19-year-old kid, 20-year-old kid bought it from Walmart legally and then went in and killed their friends. And you have to buy a beer, you have to be 21. And he was like, I guess, I said, let's throw the 19-year-olds and 20-year-olds under the bus and all get on board with making it, start with one thing we all agree, which is how many people would we save if we made it 21?
I mean, I think like those kinds of sensible gun control, things that are short of banning certain weapons are pretty popular. Like 80, 70, 80, 90% of people agree on, universal background checks and, age limits and things like that. What's interesting is like, we have gun control, and the Second Amendment people act like, it's a sacred right, and that we can't ban any kind of weapons. Well, we do. We ban. You can't own a rocket launcher. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's bizarre. You can't even own a sawed-off shotgun. It's illegal and you can't have a silencer without a special permit and stuff.
You can't have like an anti-aircraft battery on your roof.
You
can't have nukes.
And all the things on your list. Why does the AR-15, which can pierce body armor and is designed to kill as many people as possible on the battlefield, why is that an exception? Like, why is that allowed?
That's the hill they want to die on. And but the arguments they use are almost as if, well, we don't ban anything today, so that's because the Second Amendment is sacred. So if we were to ban the AR-15, then we would be violating the Second Amendment because that would be a ban, right? Like, well, we do ban things. They act like we don't.
And they
ban all kinds of weapons.
The other bizarre
You're not allowed to have a machine gun.
The Bill Clinton assault rifle ban, that expired, that the Republicans allowed to expire, Mitch McConnell, don't we have tons of data to show that, like, before, during the ban, and then after?
We did have, they scrubbed all that data. They
scrubbed?
They deleted it all, yeah.
Oh, great. Just so because it looks
And then they actually prohibited studies into that as well.
And then I feel like the FDA, because the number one cause of death among children is guns. Mm-hmm. So it's like the FDA is like, this is an epidemic. Like if 72,000 children die, I don't know what the number is, a year die from accidents or from like stray bullets in their neighborhood. Like, isn't that an epidemic for childhood health?
It's just because the Republican Congress are trapped into. So the new technique, and this is why they're afraid of Elon Musk as well. The relatively new technique of political campaign support is this idea that you're going to primary somebody if they don't agree with you. Yeah. And so that's happened a lot in California where, some issue was used as a wedge for some wealthy special interest group or person to say, all right, well, if you're not with us on this, then we will find a candidate who is, and we will fund their campaign. And so that's what they're seeing with Elon Musk. They know he has the wealth to do that, to basically say, well, if you're not with me, then if you come out against me, then I will just find a candidate in your district who is with me, and I will give them a lot of money. And so none of these people want to be primaried in their own districts. And that's the thing with the gun control. Like the NRA is very wealthy. The gun lobbies are wealthy. And so I think that despite the fact that most people agree with what you're saying, the Republicans won't vote that way because they know they would face a primary if they did.
So when you said that the NRA is very wealthy, this is my, so what I read once about that Putin punches so far above his weight that it's kind of a miracle in a way. Like we spent like $2 trillion in Syria to fight ISIS, and he spent like 23 million or 23 billion or something. Like such a small amount, and he gets so much more for it. And the NRA, like I looked at their numbers, and they're struggling right now because of corruption and infighting and stuff. And the Attorney General of New York was going to disband their whole nonprofit and stuff. I don't know where that stands, but I do know that, like, I've looked at the numbers, and it's not that much money that they've used to lobby. It's like, it's like the number one person in the Senate or the House who's received the most money, weirdly, is Mitt Romney. And he's received $13 million over many years. And so then you look at, like, isn't there like a billionaire like a George Soros who could just sort of match or exceed whatever the NRA does? And I don't think they can, because I don't think you can, like we learned from the Kamala Harris campaign that you could have $1 billion and Donald Trump can still win just based on like the right rhetoric and saying, she's for they, them, and I'm for you. What did he say?
That was it. Right?
What did he say?
That was it.
I'm for you. Is that what I forget?
I think that was it. Yeah.
She's for they, them, and I'm for you.
And I'm for you. Yeah.
And so like that was worth $200 million. Like it was just such a perfect statement that got everyone on his side and have them going, oh, dear leader. It is weird though, because here's another sort of example.
But I think the threat. All it takes is if each one feels the threat from the NRA, if each one of those Congress people, it's true that if they all came together, like the NRA couldn't fund primaries against all of them, right? But they don't have to. That's not feasible, right? So each one feels the fear of their own district being the home of a primary challenge.
Doesn't it seem odd to you, like the sheer, let's say we have Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, and then there are 215 Republicans in the House. Mm-hmm. How can it be that two people are willing to stand up to this idiot and the rest?
They were willing to lose their careers. Like they don't have careers anymore, right?
And they're both independently wealthy, and they could work in politics in a different way. They don't need to work.
But they're not electable anymore in that party, right?
So and they didn't have to move somewhere else.
So I think all these other people are like, well, I guess if I'm willing to lose my office, but they're not, I guess.
But it's kind of like, and I'm just jumping around a little bit, like, remember on the 9/11 planes, after hearing that, like, two of the planes had hit the ones over Pennsylvania, the guys were like, let's just bum rush them.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter. They can't kill all of us, So
totally. But you can easily imagine a scenario where, like, let's say in a movie scene where there's a crowd of people and there's one guy with a handgun trying to calm the crowd, right?
Right.
And he fires it into the air one time, bam, and everybody calms down. And let's say that's a bad guy with the gun. Well, yeah, all those people could bum rush that one guy. He only has 5 more bullets or whatever. But nobody wants to take a bullet.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So they don't bum rush him. They comply because knowing that they could all bum rush him and they would win, but some of them wouldn't win, right? So that's the scenario. That's the Republican Congress with the NRA.
And what's odd to me though is when the dude was, what was on the ropes with the two impeachments, and then he comes up for conviction in the Senate. Like that's the dude. The dude is down. Like if you kicked him out now, and he's banned from ever running again. Yeah, some MAGAs will lose their offices and people will be angry, but like it's not. You're going to move on, and you could pick a different guy.
Yeah.
That was the moment.
You look at Mitch McConnell, who's hated by the MAGA people, right?
Yeah.
They hate that guy.
Yeah.
And even he couldn't bring himself to vote to convict.
Yeah,
and even in subsequent interviews, they were like, if Trump is the nominee of your party again, would you vote for him? And he's like, yeah.
I know, yeah.
Like, are you serious?
Yeah.
Seriously? Oh, like, yeah, because I'm a Republican. If he's the Republican nominee, that's who I'm voting for. And that was his answer.
Rusty Bowers, remember the guy from Arizona, did the same thing. And after he testified against him in the January 6th hearings and said, I was horrified and I didn't do what he asked because it was illegal. Yeah. And they're like, if he wins again, are you going to run? And he's like, of course, yeah. And it's just,
it's just infuriating and gross. And like, I don't even know. It just breaks my brain, really, honestly. Like, I think there's people, and you see this in movie plots. There's like a standard kind of plot, sort of fork in the road type thing that happens in books and movies and stories. Is this choice between being loyal to somebody and doing the right thing? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like that's a pretty standard dilemma that a protagonist will face in a story. Like, do I remain loyal to my friend even though they are doing something bad, or do I do the right thing and I stick to my principles that I believe in? And even when it's really clear cut, that's the dilemma, right? And I think that Jonathan Haidt has done some interesting studies about this. I forget how he refers to that dilemma, but basically conservatives are much more likely to stick to loyalty, and left-leaning people are much more likely to stick to principles. And you even hear it in the sort of right-wing language, like offenses involve, like when you're disloyal to somebody, that's like they speak about loyalty a lot. They use that language a lot. And so when remember during Trump's first term or afterwards, and especially the January 6th thing, like you'd have, Bill Barr would be on TV, or John Bolton, these people that were totally in Trump's camp or working for him or whatever, and they would change their tune and they'd be, anti-Trump, or they would sort of just, even the most mild criticism would get just torched as disloyalty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely a thing where there's just some people that value loyalty more than they value principles.
That's pretty wild. So I did want to talk a little bit about the what Signalgate, as we call it, right?
Yeah.
Because it seems like he's sticking around, and I know there's the 2 days of hearing. Mark Kelly, our Arizona senator, did a really interesting job. Mm-hmm. And then yesterday in the House, there was that guy, I forget his name. Was a former Green Beret or Army Ranger, and he was talking about the idea that if he showed the weapons, the anti-aircraft batteries that the Houthis have, and asked this general and Tulsi Gabbard, can you recognize these? Do you know what they are? And then what type of aircraft can they shoot down? F-16s. And he goes, so if you had these and you were being attacked by the United States, wouldn't you want to know what type of planes, when they're coming, who they're after? Those are the three things you want to know so that you can shoot the plane down. And then imagine dragging a pilot of an F-16 through the streets and how great that would look on, then Trump would drop an atomic weapon on them or something. It's so. Anyway, so my point about it is that where do you think it seemed a little bit like the Confederacy of Dunces, which it looked like that because no one had any experience. None of these people even
no, they're all completely there's no this notion that these people are qualified and that they're complaining about DEI hires. It just makes that so. It's just so infuriating. They don't give a shit about any of that.
Yeah. So do you think it can persist? I know that this is pretty early on. We were 43 days in, and this one congressman was saying to Tulsi Gabbard, because she had this whole squirming thing where she said there wasn't any classified information revealed on the thread.
Yeah, their gymnastics they're doing to explain themselves is nuts.
And then she said
they should all just be fired. But the thing is, if they were all fired, tomorrow we would just have people that are just as bad that would be in the same. Yeah. So it's interesting that they're literally they should just be fired. There's no question. That's the.
Yeah, or
maybe they should even be prosecuted, but they should at least be fired.
Or any other administration in the past, they would have at least resigned, or one of them would have.
100%. This would be an administration-defining scandal in every other presidential administration ever, and in the Trump administration, it's like a coin toss whether we'll even be talking about it next week.
Yeah, and it does come back to that because in tennis, it's your own. If you double fault, if you hit the net the first time, you're supposed to lob it over because if you hit it twice, that's on you, right? Mm-hmm. And in this one, that is it the Lao Tzu quote that says, "Never interrupt your enemy when they're executing a series of failures or."
It might be Napoleon, but yeah, when they're
committing
it's either Lao Tzu or Napoleon. It's one of those art of war type things where. Yeah, don't interrupt your enemy while they're making mistakes, basically, is the idea, right?
Totally. And it's because that one was what a hilarious self-own that he...
They keep making it worse. They're they try to attack Jeffrey Goldberg, the journalist. He's discredited, he's a trash journalist, whatever. It's then why did you put him in the chat?
And so then,
if he's so bad, why was he in the chat?
Right. Yeah. And then he says, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist or anything, but I think he got sucked into the chat. Someone some nefarious digital, digital hacker pushed him into the chat.
I saw a clip of Pete Hegseth going, they weren't war plans. I see now the people on the left are calling them attack plans. They're not even calling them war plans anymore. Now they're saying attack plans. See? What? That's an argument all of a sudden?
That dude is...
Attack plans are not war plans.
That dude is so the bully that you hated in middle school that just grew up and he just continued to be an asshole.
Have you noticed, there's always a joke about him being a drunk and drinking and whatever. And every time I've heard somebody talk about how he's a drunk or a drinker, there's a different picture of him drinking at a party. And why are there so many pictures of that guy drinking? I feel like I've never seen the same picture twice. It's it's him drinking out of a boot. Oh, it's him pouring beer over his head. It's him taking shots. Like, why? I've never known a drinker who has so many photos of himself as a drinker out there in the world.
He did promise in front of Congress that he'd stop drinking if he was confirmed.
Yeah,
which would be interesting to see if that was true. I absolutely doubt it, but
the guy Waltz, I guess his name, Mike Waltz. He was on Laura Ingraham. I saw a clip, and he was explaining like, who hasn't had that thing happen where somebody was in your contacts, but their phone number was for a different contact. The phone number you had for that contact was for a different contact. That's how he was trying to explain it. Like, I had Jeffrey Goldberg in my contacts, but the number I had for him was a number for a different contact. Like, who hasn't had that happen? Like, that's not a thing that happens.
Well,
like,
especially if you're
nobody has had that happen.
If you're the national security advisor.
I heard Ronnie Cheng talking about it. He's like, unless you're having an affair, like that's the only time that you would have somebody in your phone with a phone number belonging to somebody else. Like, so I guess Mike Waltz is having an affair with Jeffrey Goldberg, maybe.
No, don't start that rumor. I mean, that's not even. Oh, that's hilarious. But I had heard from Ian Bremmer did say that there is someone on Waltz's staff whose initials are JG, and it's most likely that he meant to add that person. Yeah, I forget who it is, but so you've got the wrong contact. I mean, I honestly, like on my phone, I've synced it or bought a new phone and synced it so many times, and my contacts database got corrupted. And so I have some pretty hilarious photos for people that don't match at all, like some yoga teacher going like this, and then there's like some like my boss or something, and it's like had that happened, like my database got corrupted. So I'm not saying that my phone is perfect either, and I certainly have plenty of Tims that I usually what I do is I put in parentheses like how I know them in like their last name, or sometimes in the business, and sometimes when
I mean, like I could see adding the wrong contact, but this idea that you have one contact with a phone number for a different contact, that's not a thing, is it?
Well, I think what he meant there was he just picked the wrong JG, and
no, that would make sense.
Yeah,
but he said he very in a very very specific detailed way explained that. When you have people in your phone, but the phone number you have for them is the phone number of somebody else who's also in your phone. Like, no, that doesn't happen.
How about when
he should have made up more plausible. Like, I tapped the wrong name. Like that happens.
Yeah, totally. And it's true that in the iPhone, in the circle, if you don't have a photo for the person, it puts their initials. So JG. He might have seen it on the Signal thread and gone, oh,
but
that's
the thing
my
is,
friend.
like tapping the wrong name by accident in your super secret chat, like that's not that doesn't get you out of being an idiot, right? Like it is truer that this fictional explanation, this fantasy idea that you have somebody who in your contacts who has a valid phone number belonging to somebody else, like that actually. If that was a real thing that could happen, then that actually absolves you a little bit.
Yeah, but actually,
only a little bit, because why are you talking about it on this group chat app anyway? The whole thing is like anyway. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I think that it's
and guess where Waltz was during part of the chat?
What's that?
Guess where Waltz was during part of the chat? In the Kremlin. He was meeting with Russia in the Kremlin.
Was it him or was it a different guy in the Kremlin? But one of the people was in the Kremlin.
I think it was Waltz. We could look that up. I think it was Waltz in the Kremlin. And like, so during part of, he was like literally meeting in the Kremlin during when some of the things were going by. And and then Tulsi Gabbard, I love when Mark Warner said, TG, was that you? And she goes, I'm not at liberty to say. Like she just, it's like, come on, man. And then you know what she did the next day? The next day she literally goes, now that Jeffrey Goldberg released the thread, she goes, see, if you look at the thread, I'm in the thread, but I'm not really participating, so I wasn't paying attention.
There's a whole cycle. I feel like it's such a predictable cycle of like, first deny, then like attack the attack the people making the accusation, right? Like these are the cycles they go through. They go through all these different things. At some point, they attack the person making the allegations or accusations. They do just denials and deflections. And then at some point, it will get to like when there's no avoiding any of it, when it's like, when they can't kind of squirm out of it through all those other methods, the last thing they go to is, it doesn't really matter. It's not a big deal. Right.
Yeah.
Like, and they're doing all of those things at the same time. It wasn't really top secret. Right. And, yeah.
I saw.
It's just such a predictable cycle because they try all of those things. Well, he's a discredited journalist and blah, blah, blah. We're going to attack that guy. And we're going to say it wasn't top secret. And we're going to say whatever.
It kind of reminds me of, especially that what you just said there about like, well, first Haidt was like, he's a disgusting, horrible person. And that's where you said, well, why did you add him to the chat? And then they're like, well, that was a mistake. Mm-hmm. And so you're like, well, that's even worse. Like,
right. So then the final sort of plank that they go to is it wasn't a big, like, it's not a thing. It's a nothing burger. It's not a big deal. Like, why are you making a big deal out of this? It's not, none of it was top secret. We weren't saying anything important.
On Piers Morgan, there was a big panel and they had a mix of former Republicans who were anti-Trump and, they had Democrats. And then this guy from Tenet Media, remember the one that they were on a list of indicted people from the DOJ under Biden for they received $400,000 a month from Russia Today.
From the Russian.
Yeah.
Oh, they were one of the ones that received money from.
And so what he said when when they were going around, and Piers Morgan was like, "This, I'm right wing, but this is ridiculous."
So like just that they're even on the show is infuriating. Like you should be done when that happens. Like when it's revealed that you just took money from Russian state, like you should be done. Like
totally.
Why do they even get to be on the panel?
So his final thing was, when the next step after it doesn't really matter is they were like, shouldn't he resign or be fired? And he goes, well, President Trump is very talented at picking people. And so if he decides not to fire anyone, that's the right decision. And you're just like, okay, so if Trump doesn't fire anyone, that's what should have happened. Like that's what it falls down to is like, dear leader, whatever dear leader says.
Suck Trump's toes all the time.
Man. Yeah. So crazy. I remember when we were right after the election, and I was texting with my eldest daughter, and she said, "So I guess we're just left with the hope that he has a stroke." In other words, that's sort of like, what can you hope for? Because like we tried to get him impeached, we tried to get him convicted, we tried to get him arrested and convicted, and then all of those slippery, he's like Teflon Don, and now it's like, well, someone tried to kill him, that didn't work, so I guess we can just hope that eventually he'll have a stroke.
He's not really Teflon. I mean, he is Teflon in a way, but the other thing he's really good at is just playing the clock.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, just wait it out, and it's just
like creating delays.
Yeah, and he's done that. That's a Roy Cohn thing, I think, and he's done that throughout his whole real estate career. Did you read? This is interesting. The New York Times.
Yeah, like if you have enough money, you can just make the court cases go on forever.
Did you read in the New York Times last week, or maybe the beginning of this week? They did an article that said he pulled $400 million from Columbia University's grants. Mm-hmm. In exchange for like all these changes like DEI and make it safe, I don't know. And they said, remember that number, $400 million, and we're going to take you on a little walk down memory lane. Mm-hmm. So about 20 years ago or so, Columbia was looking to expand, and they had trouble because, they were in New York City and it's hard to like buy land. And so they were looking at like closer to the river. They were looking at moving into Harlem. And Trump owned this sort of rail yard thing that he wanted to develop, but no one really wanted to invest because it was like ugly and it was on the, it was nasty at the time. So he said to Columbia, why don't you buy this from me and I'll give it to you for a really good deal. It's worth like $2 billion, but I'll give it to you for $400 million. And they were like, oh, well, let's look into it. So they hired Goldman Sachs to do an assessment of it. Mm-hmm. And they walked into the meeting. Trump was late. They walked into the meeting and they said, we have between 45 million and 62 million. And we're even willing to pay you the highest amount that the assessor said. because we really want the land. And he was so furious because he wanted 400 million. He just walked out. And supposedly he never forgot that and saw the number and was like,
it's not surprising that he's
like revengeful.
He's that petty.
He's that petty and revengeful. And it's interesting when the New York Times do those like forensic financial things, like with his niece and the whole thing with that. Yeah, man. Well, the pivot was, I had a really interesting meeting with a friend who I'd met on a film set. He's a gaffer, and we sat down, and I was going to talk about lighting my last music video, like asking for tips. And we ended up going down this rabbit hole around, philosophy, and we ended up talking about Emanuel Swedenborg and discrete and continuous degrees, which was that, and like dark matter and the idea, like the Higgs boson, and like this idea that like that there's more. And he had like 7 different books that I wrote them all down, but 7 different books that sort of reference that same kind of concept of like string theory or matter that's vibrating at different levels so that you can't or cannot perceive it. And it was really interesting. And then we were talking about the idea that like, we even ended up talking about my octopus teacher and how to the octopus, we're like a god on Mount Olympus. Like we live forever because she lives for 19 years. Spoiler alert. And he was like, what if there was a life form or a consciousness or a being that was silicon based and it lived for 1 million years, and to it we were just like a little spark, like a tiny little blink of an eye. Like that's so like it couldn't even talk to us because its timeline relative to ours was so exponentially larger.
Or it's just level of consciousness and intellect or whatever. Just it was so far beyond our capabilities that we can't even guess what's in the mind of that thing.
Yeah. I mean, we've often talked about the idea that you hear that people say, well, if an alien showed up and was observing, from afar, like incognito, the human race on the planet. Some people have a theory that it would be possible that they wouldn't want to contact us because we're so violent, and they would just think like, ooh, like that we don't want to get involved with these idiots because, you know what I mean? They haven't figured out how to be to, like live sustainably on the planet, and they're just killing each other. Yeah. And so, like, what's the point? Like, who wants to be friends with them? You know what I mean? Like, and it's kind of.
Did you read the 3-body problem or? Did you read that?
I have not read it. I watched the films, and I know that it's very different from
the
like
books. The Netflix series.
Yeah, the series.
And
so I have
also the Chinese one.
Yeah. Familiar with the Netflix series, but not the books yet.
I mean, it doesn't go very far and into the books, but I mean, there's an idea in the books basically that if you discover another civilization in the universe, or if you are discovered, you are pretty much facing annihilation at that point. Like there's no reason to preserve or make contact with another civilization because they might be, or like the risk of them being a belligerent kind of advanced kind of warlike society that would want to destroy you. The risk is so high that you should either hide from them forever, find a way to hide, or you should be the destroyer. Wow. So that the idea is like, don't let yourself be discovered in the universe. And if you are, like, you better be the most powerful one.
Interesting.
And I forget what it's like, the dark forest, the metaphor they use, and it is escaping me in the moment. It's like the dark forest. Like we are in a dark forest. And the idea is just that it's a dog-eat-dog universe. And so there's no such thing as benevolent contact with an alien.
Who's the SETI at Home founder? I think is her name Judith Lassiter?
I don't know.
She came to one of the co-founders of SETI at Home, like the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And so she came. My daughter was really interested in astronomy, so we would go see her lectures at the U of A. And that's actually where there was a guy from Mount Graham from the Catholic churches from the Vatican's observatory in Arizona. They have an observatory here. And he was wearing his little collar. And I went up to him and I was like, hey, man, I'm impressed that you're here and that you're an astronomer and you run, but I'm just curious, can you take me from Galileo, Copernicus, I'll burn you at the stake for heliocentrism to I'm running an observatory? And he just looks at me and he goes, you're such an asshole. And I literally leaned back and I was like, I find it fascinating. I'm actually like impressed that you're here. And I wanted you to sort of walk me through the quick way. Like, what's your elevator pitch for why the Vatican is interested in an observatory? You know, like when they wanted to burn people at the stake for like, and he just wouldn't converse with me.
Wouldn't engage.
He just was, I think it shocked him a little bit. He wasn't expecting the question. So Judith Lasser gives a speech where
he heard it as, why are you flip-flopping on this issue?
Right.
I guess.
Or just, my theory is if you're gonna become a priest, and you have to, I'm sure that you have to take, I would hope, you have to take a history of failures of the Catholic Church, you know, like, just so that, you know what I mean? So that you can, like, because I joined the AFL-CIO, I started working for them a few years ago as a freelancer. And then I was wearing a hat and a shirt, and I walked into this coffee shop, and this South African woman said, she's a history major, and she goes, hey, the AFL-CIA. And I was like, I've heard that in a joke in the film Barcelona, you know, like but then she goes, well, just go Google it, man. Like, and dude, it is bad, man. The AFL-CIO, two guys in the 60s were working with the CIA to overthrow governments in Eastern Europe and South America. They worked on Agenda in Chile, and they were just like evil motherfuckers. And they pretended to be unionists and support unions, but they would, Anyway, anyway, my point is I went back and asked the head of the Arizona branch, hey, like, what do we do with that history? And he goes, well, we have in our bylaws that we need to constantly check ourselves and be very public, because a lot of it is that the two guys were working off the books and without any oversight by a board. Like they just were like, had taken control of the organization and its funds and were working directly with the CIA secretly. And so like he said, now that we know that we have this bad history, this black ops, history, we need to constantly check, are we actually on the side of the worker? Are we, And I was like, that's fascinating. And my point is that the church, I'm sure should and need to do that as well.
There's so many reckonings that the Catholic Church needs to do and is, I guess, somewhat engaged in doing a little bit. I don't know. But yeah, when I go to, one of the things I think about it when I don't go to church, but to the extent that I do go to church, I go to Catholic church because my wife is Catholic, right? And yeah, I mean, there's a kind of, it feels like a sort of a quiet endorsement of things just to be in the sitting in the pews. And, there's this tension between understanding that this little local parish is just kind of doing its thing and isn't responsible for the entire legacy of horrible, abhorrent crimes of the Catholic Church. But still, it's part of that organization, and being there in that building feels like a kind of exculpation of that stuff that I don't really want to offer.
Right. No, it's true. Did you recently when I heard about, so you can basically buy a pardon. And the
indulgences,
that we talked about that. Like it feels like we're back at that point with like Luther in the door. Like we're ready to be like, and there was the funny one was someone, submitted a list of people for pardons, and then they're reviewed at the White House by like this one cycle of lawyers, and then they sort of pick the ones that have met all the criteria. And so then the guy forwarded the sort of approved list, and the guy called back and go, hey, there's something wrong. Mel Gibson is not on the list. And they're like, what? Because he hasn't done anything wrong yet, so why would he need a pardon? Is the point, right? Like that, and that would be interesting if something happens with that. Like, what did Mel Gibson do that he's asking for a preemptive pardon?
Yeah, we should keep our eye on that guy.
Oh no! What was the Lethal Weapon 2? Lethal Weapon 2.
Yeah. Those are good movies, though.
Yeah, he does. He's a great filmmaker, actually. I think he's really entertaining.
Somebody wrote a thing recently on how there's no such thing as comedy anymore, and it's kind of true. Like when you think about like comedies today, because when you watch the Emmys or the Oscars and the things that get sort of listed in the comedy awards nominees are like The Bear, right? Or Severance. Severance is a comedy, right? So the comedies that exist today for the last maybe 10 years are kind of like these sort of bleak semi-drama, like they're serious comedies. Breaking Bad was a comedy.
What?
Right? Yeah, like these things were
those
considered comedies.
Severance,
but they're not
The Bear, and Breaking
really,
Bad. I just wouldn't even have considered.
It's been a while since there was something that was just funny. Or like White Lotus is another comedy, right?
Wow.
And it is. It's got funny stuff in it, but like it's not really like broad comedy. It's hard to think of anything in the last 10 years that was just silly broad comedy.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what about the Lego movie? Somebody was saying like it all changed around 2014. Like they can't think of anything after 2014 that was just funny. And I started thinking of movies like, what about the Lego movie? Well, that was 2014.
Oh, really? Huh.
What about, I was thinking like, who's a comic actor who did just funny stuff? Like I was like, the Judd Apatow movies, right? Like Seth Rogen and those guys.
Yeah.
No, all the ones that were just funny were back like or before 2014.
Pineapple
I don't know why
Express.
2014 was the cutoff, but that was this writer was saying 2014 seems to be a weird cutoff.
Who was Obama the president? Let's see. Yeah, Obama. Interesting.
Yeah.
2 years before Obama was done.
I don't know what happened in 2014, but that was it's interesting. I can't think of, I guess it's time to bring some comedy back. We need it right now.
Let's work on a comedy then. It's funny.
I mean, Signalgate is its own kind of comedy, but again, there's a darkness to it that it's not simply funny.
Well, remember starting in 2016, a lot of the comedy sketch writers were complaining that it kind of ruined their position because the reality of the world, like sort of Rudy Giuliani with a thing of hair dye dripping down at what landscaping, what was it called? They're like,
Four Seasons landscaping.
If I had written that, it would have been rejected in the writers' room. They would have been like, that's just too ridiculous.
It's too over. I mean, like it's hard for Saturday Night Live to do satire at this point.
I am looking forward. Are they working? Because if they could do The Call, like if they could do Signalgate.
But again, it's so hard for them to do something smart on it. Like I've seen some funny TikToks where there was an Australian guy who was like, they do the sound and he's like, I just got added to a group chat. And he does a whole bit. And it's really funny, right? Like I think there are people that are doing it well, but it's hard. It's hard to do it.
I saw
Saturday Night Live always just tries to take the real people and
that's true.
And I don't know, it's okay.
So, and we don't really know, none of us really know Waltz or a little bit Radcliffe, but
to your point, it's like, it's already so over the line stupid that like just to have people acting it out, it's just like they could literally act it out as it happened.
And it's just as
would
entertaining.
It wouldn't be any less satire seeming, right?
Yeah, it's true.
Like it looks like satire, it sounds like satire. And so when you actually, you have to do a kind of a funny twist on it to make it funny, because if you just act it out as it is, it's already satire.
Right. So I did see a really funny, there's a photo of Elon Musk where he looks like he's been crying or about to cry. Like his eyes are really swollen and maybe there's even a tear. And it just says underneath, it says, there was a group chat.
And he wasn't invited. That's funny.
That's funny.
Yeah, that is funny, and it's probably what he really felt, to be honest. He's probably like, at least I dodged that bullet, but on the other hand, why wasn't I there?
Why wasn't I on there? Yeah, like that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
I could have cut a lot of waste from that call. Like we could have gotten rid of the F-16 pilots. And just like no, why that's funny. But anyway, yeah. So first world problems.
First world problems. Yeah, you have one.
I was thinking yesterday when I was taking out the trash that do you have one to go first? Because I'm trying to.
Yeah, I have one. It's kind of a weird one, and I think we should talk about it as a larger conversation piece at some point. But I was just thinking about crypto. Like I don't own crypto. There was a period where I was like, regretting that I never bought Bitcoin because I remember thinking about it when it was kind of near the beginning, but then kind of thinking like, it's dumb. It doesn't make any sense. And I guess that's my first world problem. I still think it's dumb and it doesn't make any sense. And I think it's like a fiction. It feels like an emperor has no clothes kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Like there's all these people talking about it like it's big and important, and there's tons of money that people have invested, quote unquote, in crypto. But like, it's not money. You can't use it to buy things like money. So the idea that it's currency is kind of stupid. You can't go to a store and spend Bitcoin like it's currency, right? Like it's not really good for storing value, like an investment, like an ETF or something. Like it's too volatile and risky for that. And yeah, I just kind of I guess I don't get it.
And its carbon footprint is horrendous too.
Its carbon footprint is horrendous. It just feels like a very temporary thing. Like maybe it'll be around for a little while. And then the other thing about it, like people who defend it kind of had these arguments against fiat currency, right? And their sort of fear is like, well, the government could just shut down the currency or change. And that has happened in certain governments, right? Like, but at those same people, or some of the same people, are also actively seeking all of the exact same kinds of protections that crypto has from the state. Like the reason why fiat money is safe is because it's backed by the state, and if somebody steals your money, there's a legal code around money, and you can sue people, and you can prosecute theft and all that stuff, right? Like none of that really exists for crypto because it's free of the state. But all the people who want a future for crypto are like trying to push for, legal codes and regulations and safety mechanisms and all this stuff. It's like you're just trying to turn it into fiat money in all the ways that you don't like fiat money. So like none of it makes any sense to me. So that's my first world problem.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I remembered what mine was, and it's so simple. It's that we bought one of those timers that you put into the light switch for the outdoor light. Uh-huh. And it just kept like going on at weird times, and I could never. So I got another one, then
a timer, not a sensor.
I tried a sensor, and the sensor was really annoying, but because people would walk by
every one time somebody walks by.
Yeah, it is. And I actually wanted it to stay on, turn on at sundown and turn off at sunrise. Just. Anyway, so I put in an LED bulb, and the old one didn't work with LED bulbs. Like the voltage wasn't enough or something. So then I bought this one. Sorry, I bought this one, and we programmed it, and you basically set your location, your longitude and latitude, and then it's supposed to just like automatically know, like that. But it just keeps every day. It moves for now. It turns on at like 3:12.
So what I was going to interrupt to say is that so we have an outdoor light by our garage, and I wanted it to turn on at night, just to be illuminated overnight in the darkness. 'Cause that's what you want, right?
Yeah, exactly. And turn off.
We literally just bought an LED bulb that has its own built-in light sensor, and so when it's dark outside, the bulb turns on.
I think
so. It looks for darkness.
Yeah.
And then the bulb turns on when like a nightlight does.
I think I tried that, and the problem was because I have it inside of this little. I don't like to see the bulb, so I have it inside of this little kind of box, and so it can't see.
So it can't sense the light.
Yeah, it didn't really work. At least the first one. This was years ago. I mean,
this one's recessed, so it's sort of like. But I guess it still sees enough light somehow.
I mean, the Tucson Electric Company sent us a box of night lights that are LED. And they have a really good sensor. So we started putting them around, and you cover it and it turns on and take away. It's really, they're great. And so I could probably just rig one up in there. That's a great idea.
That's a good hotel room hack. Have you ever been in a hotel room and you wake up and you have to pee and it's like pitch black?
Yeah.
And your choice is to try to navigate to the bathroom in utter darkness, or to turn on the light and kind of blind yourself to get to the bathroom.
I use my phone screen. I tap the side of my phone.
And you reach over for your phone.
And I have to uncharge it. But I do
They should have nightlights in hotel bathrooms.
Yeah, that's a good point. Nightlights.
That should be a standard part of a hotel bathroom. All right, so that's my mini first. That's a better first world problem that is more aligned with yours.
Yeah, I like that.
Rather than a whole huge topic like crypto.
Crypto. We can definitely talk about crypto again another time. And we funny story. Like my daughters were at Stanford and during the crypto rise, right? Mm-hmm. And they one year came back for Thanksgiving, and they commit. I even bought I think I even bought an NVIDIA graphics card for my Mac tower to try to mine crypto. And it was just so nerdy that I stopped. It was way too code heavy, right? Yeah. And so I could have started it. It also felt kind of weird that using all that electricity and just cranking.
I remember when Bitcoin was $15.
Yeah.
And I remember where I was working, and I remember my coworkers hey, there's this thing called Bitcoin. We should buy some. And we were the software we were working on had some currency settings in it, and it was some financial reporting stuff that we were working on. And so we had these conversations about, should we have crypto in the list? Should we do crypto? Should we have Bitcoin supported in our product somehow? And I remember thinking it's $15. I should just buy some just to have it. And there's part of me that's man, that would have been a really good time to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think it makes any sense.
It's so true. But let's talk about it another time, just because I have there's a bunch of ways to look at it, and also the fact that the oligarchy does. It seems like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk would love to.
They're very bullish on crypto and this weird sovereign wealth fund to buy crypto that doesn't make any sense and all that. Yeah, we should definitely talk about it.
And there's evidence, or at least people have reported that they would love to get rid of the dollar or trash the dollar, get whack its value way down, and that's part of what they're trying to do by gutting the federal government. But anyway, I think we're going to survive, man.
One way or another.
We'll persist or not persist, and that'll be what happens, right? Always great to talk to you, man, and hope you have a good day.
What you resist persists.
What you resist.
I guess that should apply in this sense, maybe. I don't know. That's a personal thing. It's a spiritual, the traits in yourself, the things in yourself that you resist are the things that persist. Have you ever heard that?
Well, I have, but I had this friend who was.
It doesn't really work in a resist the oligarchy thing, but anyway.
I have this friend, an artist in Tucson, who's from New Jersey, and he's written actually a novel it's a autobiography. Anyway, he tells me this story. He used to dabble in sort of trying to follow gurus or find these and he met this woman from Long Island who claimed to be the reincarnation of a guru, and he started getting really into, thought she was really wise. Mm-hmm. And one day she says to him, and he's very, I would say particular and can be very critical, especially about other artists, so I interact with him as an artist, and so he doesn't really like a lot of other artists, Mm. He's very particular.
He's prickly,
but also just, I would say, judgmental, right? So this woman says, if I told you that you could have everything you want in the world, in the universe, everything could be yours, but you have to do one thing. You have to give up entirely all judgment of other people and accept them exactly the way they are. And he just was that's just, you pick the one thing that I cannot do. It's in my nature to be critical of other people, and it's but it's so close. If I could just give that up, I could have everything. He's So I think that's funny. That's what you resist persists. What you embrace. I can't think of a good rhyme for that, but
is in your face. All right.
Yeah. Sayonara, and we'll
see you, brother.
Satellite haiku. All right.
Satellites? A satellite represents a journey, information gathering, this journey around the Earth.